Good afternoon, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Special edition of the program. Rachel Miselman is my guest. She is running for U.S. House of Representatives right here in Massachusetts, 7th Congressional District. Rachel, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Absolutely, Charles. And it's really, I think all the years that we've known each other. So just before we went on, I'm like, what has it been? Like 10 to 12 years?
How about
This
that?
is, yeah, this is the first time I think that, we've been in an interview situation together.
I think it is. And I want to help. I want to try to get as many candidates on as I can,
That's wonderful.
especially Republicans, obviously, because
Sure.
I'm hoping that this is going to be a year for Republicans. It's such a wild year that we can't tell exactly what's going to go down. But Rachel, let's just talk a little bit for starters about your story, how you got involved here, what brought you into this race.
All right, well, that's a very good question. I am a first-time candidate for public office, and so understandably, people are going to be like, "Did you maybe want to start a little bit lower?" And first of all, when you're out there, you have to be prepared to take criticism. You have to be prepared for people to question whether you're fit to run, based on experience, based on knowledge. So I completely respect that. And I myself, I believe that you start at the bottom, you work your way up. But what I want to tell people is I've been actually involved for, oh my gosh, about 14 years in the political scene, and I did a lot of work initially on municipal level. So I was a communications director in a city councilor campaign, and offered strategy. In addition to that, I volunteered for a lot of other campaigns, not necessarily in an official capacity, and I learned a tremendous amount in terms of how to network with people and how government runs at that level, and the issues. And that's important because I find that a lot of people, when they run, they'll start talking about issues, and it's like, well, hold up. That's not an issue that would be addressed at that level of government. So it's really good for me to do a lot at municipal level because, everything is local, right? All politics is local, as Tip O'Neill once said. And that really is so true. In 2010, 2009, 2010, I ran a state representative campaign for about 6 or 7 months. And I learned a lot at that level. And it was for me, it was very informative, doing a lot behind the scenes. And actually, I'll be honest with you, that is a place where I had grown very comfortable, because it's very interesting to be in a room full of people who are movers and shakers, so to speak, and then you kind of just step back and you just watch and see how people interact and how they go about presenting themselves. But I gradually. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I think that you're a very interesting candidate because you have been involved in the nuts and bolts of politics behind the scenes, where the people who actually do the work, not the figureheads, get things done. I mean, you know how the sausage is made, so to speak, and that is someone that is eminently qualified. It's rather than have somebody just show up who's a celebrity or who just has a big name. You've been in the trenches.
I have.
You've toiled the vineyards, as they say in politics.
Well, I have, and I continue to do different things like phone banking, in unofficial capacities, volunteering for different levels, campaigns at different levels, for different levels of government, and I think that you're right. When you start off behind the scenes, and you do learn the nuts and bolts. So when you have an event, if I have an event, well, I guess now it's online, right? An online event, and 50 people show up, you appreciate that. You know
Hmm.
what that means because, I remember organizing events and, you know, as the campaign manager for the state rep candidate. And I remember, like, filling a room of 75 people as a Republican in an area where Republicans did not run. That was a huge success. That was a big deal. As we went on, like if 7 candidates showed up, or 10 or 15, what that means. If people say, I'll put a yard sign out, you understand what that means.
Well, now you seem to understand the basic nuts and bolts of what it takes to win a congressional race. It is just what, as you say, it's putting up yard signs, getting up bumper stickers, making the phone calls. Every good politician has to make those phone calls, and you have to ask people either to vote for you or you have to ask people for money. Everyone does it. Barack Obama did it when he was sitting in the White House. Donald Trump does it in the White House. Across the street from the U.S. Capitol building are these nerve centers for both the Republicans and the Democrats, these big buildings where congressmen, as part of their day, will go over there and they'll make phone calls. That's what you have to do. That's the way it works. And I think if you could do that, you could win. Now, let me ask you a little bit. Let's get into some of the ideological issues.
Let me
Uh,
just also,
yeah,
let me
please.
also say this. The reason why I finally stood up as a candidate, I want to tell you that the first time I actually tried to run for something was as an alternate delegate in 2016. And so I stood up and I ran for that and I won. So I was able to go to the Republican National Convention. And so increasingly I've kind of come from the background, I've emerged from the background, because I figured, okay, I'm doing all this stuff behind the scenes for so many different people. Now I want a little bit of reciprocity, because I want to see Republicanism grow here in Boston and around Boston. And unfortunately, I don't want to disparage anybody, but I just wasn't seeing that reciprocity. And I was trying to, work within the existing infrastructure. And then finally, I just stood up and said, you know what? I think we need to, I don't want to say dismantle what we have in place, but we really need to expand it and fortify it.
Good. I mean, the
And,
Republican Party in Massachusetts is very weak. It's very demoralized. It's very liberal. It's kind of a Me Too party. And
sure,
however, as a Republican candidate in the 7th District, where you are running against Ayanna Pressley, we'll talk about that in a minute.
sure.
It's a good idea to go around and get appointments, if possible, with all of the Republican city and town committees, and they'll see you. And you go there and you make a little speech and you ask people for help and you ask people to go out and knock on doors. You ask people for things like signatures. You have to ask people, but you build a grassroots infrastructure. That's the best way to win. Now,
Absolutely.
now,
Speaking generally, yeah.
Rachel, let me ask you a little bit about the ideological questions. I mean, do you consider yourself to be a conservative? Why did you become Republican?
Well, those are really outstanding questions. I do consider myself a conservative, and I will tell you that, um, years and years ago, like I would say maybe in 2020, someone would have asked, I probably would have, as a knee-jerk reaction, said, "Oh, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a conservative Democrat." And that's quite simply because I grew up in a city where the Republican presence was non-existent.
Yeah.
And it's me choosing, or just as a need, oh, Democrat. I don't think that's good or bad. It's just, well, of course, what do you expect? Like, what are people supposed to do? But I've always been a conservative. And why Republican? Well, I just, it was so funny. I before I came back to the States, because I was out of the States for a while. I was out of the States from 1995 to 2004. But actually, even before I came back to the States, I said I'm a conservative, but you know what? I'm actually not a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I started meeting more people. I started reading books. Just listening to different voices. And I said, well, actually, I'm a Republican. Again, it's not good or bad. It's just what it is. And for me, conservative. I hate how a lot of conservative Republicans feel that they have to show, well, they're one of the good ones. I don't see a lot of,
I know what you mean.
right,
It's
like, I
like
don't, right,
that's like George W. Bush's compassionate conservative, as if somehow conservatism is not compassionate. But what? Yeah, I think I get that.
right, I don't see progressive Democrats making the same, um, kind of like plea, like, oh, well, just, hear me out, listen to what I have to say. I'm really not a bad person. I'm a progressive Democrat, but I care. No, it's something that conservative Republicans do. And I'm not going to apologize. This is who I am. Um, and I also don't like how people feel the need to say, if they're Republican, they'll say, well, I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal. And I
Mm.
think that you can be conservative both fiscally and socially, and I think that there's a lot of good that you can do. In Boston, the Boston Human Rights Commission had been defunct for at least 10 years. I actually think if I have my information correct, I think it hadn't been an operative since the 90s, the late 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was something that I really wanted to kind of get going again. I actually have a background in human rights, as you know, but I'll share with your listeners that I trained as a barrister. And so human rights, it's not just a hashtag for me. It's something that I'm deeply, deeply committed to. And crimes against humanity and all the, things like, genocide or human trafficking. So these are things that I've continued to advocate for in terms of raising awareness, and really kind of trying to engage people to learn more and do more on these issues. But yeah, you can be socially conservative. I mean, as a conservative Republican, I played not an inconsiderable role in getting the Boston Human Rights Commission resurrected. That's a
Hmm.
big thing.
It is.
As someone who spent nearly 10 years as a foreigner, I have that did a lot to shape my views on a lot of different things, like on language learning, the global market. And there's something called the Sister Cities program, which was started by President Eisenhower, as you well know. And the idea was to cultivate relationships, exchanges, really foster an understanding between different peoples. And so I said, let's do something with the Sister Cities program right here in Boston. And I had been trying to talk to someone, since it was well before Mayor Walsh. It was during Mayor Menino's time. So it was something that I started trying to really advocate for, like, since 2010, 2011. And finally, in 2016, I succeeded in getting, I submitted an order for a hearing. It was introduced to the council. And so then I testified before the Boston City Council. And I said, look, this is important. This is a way where we, children, but not just children, adults, they can learn languages.
Hmm.
We can send people abroad. We can have people come here. We can create collaborative, projects that require a collaboration that can yield fruits for cities in different parts of the world. We can try to build upon and expand our tourism, right? The tourism that we have, the sales, the revenue. So I testified before the Boston City Council. This was in 2016. And some of my recommendations included, first of all, update your website. This is, we're looking at a website that goes back to the 1990s again.
Hmm.
Let's make sure it's up to date, that it's easy on the eye. It's a nice layout.
Hmm.
And, let's make sure that this is active again, so that people will know about it, so that we can really try to work on cultivating these relationships. And at the time, I'll say one other thing, it was kind of shoehorned, in my opinion, but it was shoehorned. It was under the umbrella, but wrongly so, of special events and tourism. I said, no, it needs to be its own entity. And based on my recommendations, the Global Affairs Division was created within the Walsh administration. And
Wow, that's great.
yeah, and there might have been some input from some of his people, but certainly, a lot of my recommendations were directly implemented, and it did a lot to get the ball rolling. And, I'm glad that people listened. And I'm glad that people saw the utility of my suggestions. I didn't necessarily always get thanks, but I guess that's not always going to happen, right? It's politics.
Right, exactly. You have to know how to toot your own horn. Now, Rachel, what about the incumbent, Ayanna Pressley? She is considered one of the so-called squad. She's like a figure in that whole movement. Um, what is her record like in Massachusetts, and what are her vulnerabilities? How are you going to take her on? Is she going to debate you? Is a good question.
Well, I would love to, obviously, first and foremost, I have to get on the ballot. And so that's what I'm working toward. I have to get on the ballot for in September.
Mhm.
But I think that she has a lot of vulnerabilities, actually, because she's someone who is very divisive. And people don't, this is Boston. This is Everett. This is Randolph. This is, part of Milton, parts of Cambridge, parts of Boston too, a lot of Boston,
Oh yeah.
Ramsey, Somerville. So people in this district, they don't necessarily mind someone who is not going to just kind of tiptoe around things, but you do have to get things done. And so what I'll say is that Ayanna had a weak record going in to Congress. So notwithstanding the fact that she had been in the Boston City Council for nearly 10 years, what even some of her most fervent supporters were saying is that, well, she's the first Black woman to get elected to the Boston City Council, and it's illustrious, long history. And then her licensing, she worked to try to streamline, to make the process of obtaining liquor licenses easier. And supposedly that was done, and I say supposedly, and I'll explain why. Supposedly that was done to, enable underserved communities to be able to, open up and serve as destination points for the other parts of the city and in other parts of the state.
Right.
And that might sound wonderful on the face of it, but really, if you go around to what were called these underserved communities, I didn't see too much of a difference. So then it becomes, well, then what really did you accomplish? Where exactly did those liquor licenses go? And people, also mentioned that, she has spoken out eloquently as a survivor of sexual violence. And let me just make it clear, Charles, and Ayanna knows this. Ayanna Pressley knows this. I know her because, again, personally, because she's been my elected voice for a decade. I'm never going to cross certain lines. And I think it's important that she has spoken up about some tragic experiences that she has had. I think it enables other people who have had similarly tragic experiences, because you never want to equate one person's tragic experiences with another. But if there's been another person or other people who have been who have suffered sexual violence, it gives them the courage to speak up. Having said that, with all of the respect possible, with all the due respect possible, I think that is not a reason to vote for somebody. And so after nearly, I said, a decade as a city councilor, it's like, okay, well, what have you done? Now, what I want people to understand, what I want your listeners to understand, when Ayanna got elected, when she unseated Capuano, we lost billions of dollars billions of dollars to the district. Capuano had seniority. Now, to be fair to Congresswoman Presley, and I will give her that respect, I'll use that title. I mean, she, says the occupant of the White House. I'm not, I don't want to engage in a similar tactic.
Mm.
Congresswoman Presley, to be fair, this is her first year. So necessarily and obviously, she's not going to enjoy the seniority that Capuano had. Capuano had been in for 10 terms. But then what I would have expected, what I needed, not what I would have liked, but what I needed from her is that she put her head down and try to build alliances to try to get whatever money she can into the district. I feel like infrastructure, we are in dire need of money for the district. Our roads, our roads are in terrible condition. And it's not just, we're not just talking about money from the state. We also need money for federal level. Our public transportation system, we need money. Also, I'll be honest, her membership in the squad, you're a public servant. You're not a celebrity. You're not a reality
Yeah, I
star.
know what you mean. She's a real like media hound, and she goes around and fanning resentment and anger and division. I mean, I do think that people might understand that in our district because I believe that Massachusetts, in spite of our
Charles.
national reputation, tends to be a little bit more conservative, and it was kind of an upset that she came out of nowhere and beat Capuano. I remember she went on with Sue O'Connell, who does a program on
Sure.
New England Cable, and Sue O'Connell even said to her, "said can you give me a raison d'être in terms of why you're running?" And her basic answer was, "Well, because I think that the office needs a new color."
And
Right?
that's problematic.
Yeah.
I feel like, and again, I want to respect Miss Presley. I want to respect the Congresswoman. Having said that, I am very unhappy with the way she has represented this district.
Now, does she do anything because she hasn't really brought a better business atmosphere
No, she
to
really.
certainly
No,
not to Roxbury and Dorchester, which is the bulk of her district, and she hasn't really, she's railing now against the police and defunding the police, which would be a disaster, especially in Boston, because first of all, our police in this city are pretty good. You know,
they really are.
they're
And
very, I mean, they're kind of cutting edge. The rest of the country could look to Boston
that's
as,
right.
the way they do work the neighborhood and they know people and they don't go in heavy handed in the situation. I think we could really look to them as a beacon and to defund them. I mean, to pull, to leave neighborhoods. So once again, we'll have like we did in the 1970s when neighborhoods were burning and where, drug gangs were like children, like what's happening right now in Chicago. Children are being killed in the crossfire of drug gang shootouts. Complete lawlessness. I mean, it's insane.
Well, I'll tell you, Charles, and I'm glad you said that. Thank you for bringing that up and just kind of throwing it in my lap and say, okay, what do you want to do with this? We do have serious drug problems, and you mentioned Roxbury, Dorchester, so obviously she represents not quite all of Dorchester, but a lot of it.
Of it, yeah.
Right. And I think she has I have to go back and look at my, it's kind of weird because sometimes
Yeah, well,
I was
that's the
explaining earlier,
gerrymandered.
Jamaica Plain, there are 3 precincts that she did, like Stephen Lynch has a little bit of it. But I think all of Roxbury is hers. And, my thing with her, she likes to refer to these areas because they're home to a lot of people of color. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to refer to these neighborhoods, then let's talk about the issues. Now, first of all, I want to say that I don't think she gets a lot done for all her talk about people of color who are impoverished, Black and brown people. I don't think she gets a lot done for them. Let me give you a concrete example. Tito Jackson came out. He ran for a mayor, of course.
Yeah.
Right, and he put forth he introduced into the conversation a very startling statistic. So, U.S. born Black households in Boston's statistical metro area are worth $8. And it was like in stark comparison to a white household, which was worth ever so much more. And Ayana has seized upon this, and she's like a dog with a bone, won't let it go. But at the time, she didn't say too much about it. And the thing is, okay, well, what have you done since to increase the wealth in these communities? What have you done to increase generational wealth? Home ownership is very difficult. Even renting in Boston is very difficult, and not just in Boston, throughout the district. It's very tough to live here. Massachusetts in general is a very expensive state. But when we're talking about generational wealth, a lot of times that is tied into home ownership. And so we don't have that, in a lot of different cases, and not just with people of color, but white people too. They just can't afford to buy. And then it's also, a lot of people, regardless of color, but, because she talks so much, and quite frankly, why don't we just say exclusively about Black and brown people who are who have fewer resources. She talks about them in such a way, and it's like, okay, but you're talking about them as always being victims, but again, what are you doing to better things for them? So a lot of people cannot afford to buy a home. How about jobs? Because maybe if you focused on jobs, try to do things to create job growth, try to create incentives for job creation, then maybe people could afford homes. So she's not doing what she needs to do. When you have roundtables about hair discrimination, when you're having serious discussions about, forgive my familiarity, period poverty, I find that problematic, because period poverty, hair discrimination, look, if you don't like someone's hair, chances are you're not going to like their skin color. All right, that's what that comes down to. So let's just talk about racism, okay? As for period poverty, let's just talk about poverty. And how do we address poverty? We work on education. She hasn't said much about education either. In fact, she has largely steered clear.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, besides
Okay.
getting into trivial questions of almost demeaning the real problem of race relations by getting into these trivialities, she's not addressing education, whereas President Trump is. During I watched his speech at Tulsa, and he spoke at length, and it's something he's worked toward, of bringing school choice, of allowing for tax credits, so that somebody who goes to one of these big, rotten inner city schools can get to go to a charter school, or a private school, or a suburban school, or a various private schools, because someone gets a tax credit for giving money so that they can do that. These are ideas that have been on the table for a while. She is completely against that, because she's a creature of the teachers unions, and they want to shut kids into these rotten schools. So I think that you have an issue on that score. And I think that aligning yourself with the president's position on that, not that you agree with him on everything, but on this one
Sure.
issue, is a good one. And it's one of those things that the media doesn't want people to realize.
Well, no, it really
Then
does.
they'll talk about his crowd size, or they'll talk about some stupid comment he might have made on, instead of actually taking a look at the substance of what he's bringing up here. So,
Yeah,
Rachel,
absolutely.
talk a little bit about this issue, because this is something that really not only affects people in terms of their children's education, but it's something that if we elect you to the House, you can begin to co-sponsor and craft legislation that might actually help to get children involved in a better school situation so they can learn how to read, they can learn how to think, they can become self-actualized citizens?
Well, there are a lot of different things that I want to do, and I'm going to be dropping it like today or tomorrow. So this works out very well that I get to kind of tease people. But I want to focus on for children 2 stages. And so at first, I wanted to focus on 0 through 5. Um, you know that not only do I focus on politics, but also like culture, pop culture. And so over the years, like I've talked about, like, you know, everything from Britney Spears and Ronald Reagan, that can be in one of my shows. You know, that's my work in independent media. And I've also talked about the royal family. Now, why am I talking about the royal family in particular? Because there was an initiative that's been championed and crafted by Duchess Kate,
Right.
Duchess of
Kate
Cambridge.
Middleton, yeah.
And right, Kate Middleton. And, you know, she was talking about how 0 through 5 is such a critical time for children. I want to expand upon that because first I was going to focus on that, but I thought about it, did research, talked to a lot of different people throughout the district, and really took the thermometer. Okay. And so what I want to do is, you know, 0 through 5, but also like 11 to like say 15 or 16, you know, 11 through 16. And what I want to do is, what do we need to do to get to where we have, you know, our children grow up and have tools that will enable them to make informed choices, that will allow them to advocate for themselves, that will allow them to have options, that will allow them to really be productive members of society. And I think that there are a lot of different things that we can do. But I also want to tell you, Charles, that I don't want to just, you know, I think the problem that we have is that we only focus on education for children. I personally believe in being a lifelong learner. And I want to make sure that we have different educational opportunities for our adults as well. You know, what happens if there's automation and, you know, a manual worker needs to learn a new skill? You know, we need to have resources available so that person can continue to be useful, that person can continue to feel like he or she is doing something really productive and fulfilling his or her potential, you know, in
Yeah.
situations like that. We also have people who want to change careers. We have people that discover careers, right? You know, and so one of the things that I want to do, in addition to pushing this idea, you know, these 2 blocks during the lives of children, but also make sure we have funds for trades,
Right.
for people who want to learn new skills or different skills. So again, it can be because, you know, maybe their job has been rendered obsolete, or maybe they just simply want to perform better in the role that they have. So, you know, there's a lot that can be done. And what I would like to do, and this comes because I come from a family, I believe you know this, you know, blue collar workers. And so my father is a retired tin knocker, and I have a lot of respect for the trades. And so I would like to see people have the opportunity, you know, children, our youth have the opportunity to learn the trades in high school. We have Madison Park High School right here in Boston. I want to see that school to be like the paradigm for vocational training. We
Good.
have that potential. Why aren't we doing it? And I hope I'm not, saying something I shouldn't. I want to, this is supposed to be about me, but I also want to kind of give a shout out to, there's something called the People's Academy. And I can talk to you more about that at another point in time.
Right. We'll do another show on it.
Um, right, but I have a friend, Michael, and he's really been pushing this. This is his baby, and it speaks to giving adults training in the trades, and it gives them they're in a school / residential setting. And the idea is to really take people from point A to point B and really then allow them to say, hey, okay, now you have the skill set, now go acquire generational wealth. And that's what can be done. So, those are some of my ideas about education. But, Ms. Presley, Congresswoman Presley, really, she never speaks about education. If she does, it's through the optic, it's through the lens of discrimination. Oh, well, we have our Black and brown girls who are more likely to be expelled because of their hairstyle. Look, I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about that. I mean, I'm not saying it's unimportant, but when you think about that we are an education-based economy, because we are. I mean, it's certainly true for Boston, but it's true for the entirety of the district, the 7th Congressional District, and really you can say for all of Massachusetts. We are primarily an education-based economy between, our schools, research, even I want to kind of, maybe it'll be an uncomfortable thing, but to even kind of put like tech startup under that maybe umbrella. So we're
coding.
So we're very much an education-based, an innovation-based economy, and we need to be able to speak to that. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with Congresswoman Presley speaking to the issues that some of our population might have, but I think she should be focusing on the quality of education for everyone, and that's not what she's doing.
Good.
That's not what she's doing at all.
I think you stated well. Rachel, you're obviously a person of great erudition and thought. And in that way, you're an unusual candidate, because I've interviewed candidates over the years, and you have depth, you've got experience, you've got something going on upstairs, unlike a lot of people running for office.
Thank you.
And so I really hope that you get a proper hearing. It's not easy. Politics is a tough game. But I think the more you can get out there, the more people you can meet, the more you're going to improve your chances. And it doesn't take much to win. You're just a few more votes than the other person. Because I want to kind of wrap it up for today, but I want to have you back.
Thank you.
What is, in general, your feeling about your position with regard to President Trump?
Well, what I'm going to say is I'm a supporter of his. I don't want to shy away from that, just like I don't want to shy away from the label conservative. That's I am. That doesn't mean I agree with Trump on everything. Like, speaking of education, Betsy DeVos, I don't like her. Why? Because, okay, I'm an old school Boston girl, you know that. And so I think that if you are going to be in a position, you need to have experience. So she doesn't have any experience in education, neither as an educator or as an administrator. So I think that he could have made better choices. There are other cabinet choices he's made, and I feel like, okay, those weren't the best fit. Have these people done a terrible job? Maybe not.
But it could be better. Yeah, that's a fair criticism. You bet.
Right. And there's sometimes, he might say things, or he might choose certain courses of action. I want the right, just like I would with anybody, to say, well, I don't know, I'm not so sure. But I will say this, I don't believe he's a racist. I'm tired of Miss Presley referring to him as the occupant.
Oh, it's ridiculous, yeah.
It really is. Show some respect. And the thing is, I want to also get this out. I believe that Trump wants to work on behalf of everybody, and I do too. I feel like a lot of people in this district have been left out. There are a lot of Black and brown people who are not represented by Miss Presley. Not every Black and brown person belongs to this particular economic class. And even if you go to the particular, very particular group that she's always referencing, you can find people who are not happy with what she has done, who don't agree with everything that she's done, and don't want a hand out. They want a hand, they want a leg up. So I want to work to represent everybody. Black and brown people, regardless of their economic status rather, but also just everybody, Asians, whites, you know, I don't care about your economic status. I don't care about the racial group that you're a part of, your ethnic background, your faith. If you are in this district, your needs, your concerns are my concerns. And I think that probably the one of the things that's driving me the most is that you have a congresswoman at present who believes that she's untouchable, and I do believe that she thinks that because she's in a safe blue district, and that she can, as such, do whatever she wants. And it's like, no, you're here to represent everybody, and that's not what you've been doing.
And just as a little political calculus here, I don't think she is untouchable. And the reason I say that is because I don't think that the liberal establishment in Massachusetts, including the Boston Globe, I don't think they like her.
I don't, I don't,
And which is why, Rachel, I think they'd give you a fair shot. They don't want you to win. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they'll give you a fair shot, and then they'll try to kill you later. But they'd like to see Ayanna Pressley roughed up a little bit. She's not the kind of liberal that they like. She's too far left of their view. They're much more into a Capuano or like a Stephen Lynch, kind of
and
established.
I have a lot of respect for Capuano.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was a liberal, but he was an old-fashioned Tip O'Neill, Joe Kennedy kind of liberal. And I think that
if I went to something, he would, I don't, forgive me for interrupting, I just want to get this out there. He would, he would accommodate me, as well. So
that's right. And I think that the Globe, they won't let you win, which you may do anyways, but they'd like to see her roughed up a little bit, which is why you might contact them and see if they'll sponsor a debate between you and Pressley, and also contact BNN, Boston Neighborhood Network News, and try to get on some of those shows. Those are seen by everyone in Boston, and it's a very good cable television station.
Don't I know it? Don't we know it?
Yeah, that's my advice to you, someone who used to have a show there. Anyways, Rachel, let my listeners and viewers know how they can help, how they can reach you.
Okay. So let me just say this. I won't, I appreciate your very kind words. I won't speculate too much about what people want or don't want. But I think that, I think people are tired. I think people are very tired. I find that, people who are lifelong Democrats, they feel like, my goodness, what's going on here? And, I think people want to be able to, they don't always want to be fighting. They don't always want to be, one group doesn't always want to have to be defending itself, and not all Black and brown people want to be victims 24/7, right? As a woman of color, I find myself on the receiving end of racism because of my skin color. But do I always want to be a victim? No. So I think that people are ready. I hope that they're ready. To hear a different perspective. And so that's what I bring. For people to help me, I'm going to be dropping my website very soon. I'm very, very excited about it. And it's going to be very comprehensive. It's not going to be just kind of like cliches. I'm going to go into detail. I'm going to talk more about education. I'm also going to talk about criminal justice reform because I do have a background. I don't know if you know this, I did nearly good like 9 or 10 months at the probation department, the Dorchester court.
Good background. And you're in a position to talk about crime and reform, so that's very good.
Right. And so what people can do to help, so again, once I drop the website, and I'm going to put that on social media, but if people can already start or continue to really kind of tune in, I have a page on Facebook, Rachel Nicole Miselman for Congress. Please go there and like it. because it's important. It takes like 2 seconds alike, but it's very important because at the very least, you're hearing, you're staying abreast of what I'm trying to say, the messages on the different issues that I'm trying to get out there. And so you're at least being able to hear something different. And ultimately I can earn people's vote, but if they choose to go another way, well then guess what? At least they've heard another point of view, and that's
Absolutely.
critical in a real democracy. I'm also on Twitter at Rachel Miselman, written as one word. And you know, there are all kinds of other ways to reach me. People can reach me at Rachel Nicole Miselman, written as one word, at gmail.com. But again, I'm on Facebook, Rachel Nicole Miselman for Congress. Please, go there, like the page. I'll be sharing the website there very soon. I'll be sharing it on Twitter very soon. And Miselman is Miselman. It looks like Misselman, but it's Miselman. Rachel, Rachel.
Very good, Rachel. So get out and vote, everyone. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family,
So important.
and hit the streets and get people out there, because we can really make a change and really put some quality people into office. Anyway, Rachel, again, I want to thank you very much for joining
Oh,
me this afternoon.
thank you so much for having me on. And let me just say this really quickly.
Yeah.
I will be a write-in candidate. And so I'll be sharing what that means and how you can give me your vote. But what it means is literally you'll have to write my name in. So if you're a Republican, it's easy enough. Just, write my name in. I'll be providing my name as well as, the correct spelling of my name. So, people will have that. I know it's not necessarily an easy name. And I'll also be providing my address. But if you're unenrolled, that is an independent, that's actually your status, you're an unenrolled voter, then what you need to do is you have to take the Republican ballot. Because if you take the Democratic ballot and try to write my name in, it's not going to count. Not in September.
Right.
In November, yes. It doesn't matter. But in September, you have to take a Republican ballot. And if a Democrat wants to vote for me, unfortunately, he or she cannot for now, unless he changes his affiliation to either unenrolled or Republican.
No, thanks for talking about that, because in Massachusetts, I think it's almost 50% now of people are unenrolled.
Sure.
You can go into the voting booth and change to Republican or Democrat for that matter, and just vote in a primary. And then as you leave, go back to unenrolled. That's just how this state works.
Right.
Anyway, again, Rachel, I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. You've been very gracious. Thank you for this opportunity.